you get banned on Twitter anyway?
Alleged threat.
Of course.
Yeah.
Okay. And then Jimbob, go ahead.
Made by Jimbob, political cultural cartoonist and commentator or whatever. Made by Jimbob is my YouTube, and also Made by Jimbob is my Instagram, and madebijimbob.com is my website.
I appreciate that. Before we get started with the debate, we just want to make sure that we have that proposition down so that both sides understand what it is. Can you guys both kind of define what the proposition is?
Yeah, so I believe we agreed upon should human rights be extended to animals.
Okay. And Jim Bob, is that good with you?
Yeah.
All right. Excellent. Whichever one of you wants to open, there's no real challenger tonight. Jim Bob, if you want to start, you can.
Sure. Okay, cool. Well, if the topic is should we extend human rights to animals, we're going to have to go through and determine what a right is, what constitutes a right, where do rights come from, etc. But also, what is it peculiar about humans such that we assume the concept of rights? What is it? Is there something about humans specifically that make us sort of special in this case? Now, there's a couple of problems we'll probably see because the rights will then point to some other things. And most of the time in vegan debates, they point to sentience. Now, depending on how vegan gains define sentience, it will determine the direction of this debate. But the problem with sentience in general and the way it's defined is the problem of distinguishing between reactivity to stimuli and conscious thoughtful experiences. If my opponent appeals to sentience, he's going to have to distinguish between a neurological or biological reactivity to the external world and conscious, thoughtful, meaningful experiences. And the two, if there is a point at which one becomes the other, we have to figure out where that threshold is and why we determine that to be the threshold. In other words, a blade of grass, when it's mowed, has a reaction and it lets off some sort of smell, or a plant lets off some sort of toxin when it's reacting to something. So this must be fundamentally different than how sentience, as far as having a conscious, thoughtful experience about the world and having a value judgment about it, must be two different things. Problem two, why we ought to value sentience. So even if sentience is somehow established, what I think it's going to be pretty blurry. Where in the gradient of this distinction called sentience do we start assigning the value? Ought we introduce sentience where it's missing? Ought we not remove sentience where it actually is? The problem with sentience, as far as the precondition for experience, pleasure or pain, it doesn't tell us whether or not keeping it or removing it is good. It only tells us what you might be able to do with it once you have it. So that becomes a little bit of a problem, I believe, with my opponent. Problem three would be the equalization problem when he says trait equalization. If we equalize man and beast, this doesn't tell us whether we should mimic the beast or the man. And to make the claim, so once we equalize man and beast, the claim that comes after that, what we ought to do, how we ought to behave once these are equalized, we could just as well say, well, men should treat other men like beasts because we're now equal, right? So there's no distinction between beast and man. If you were to make a value claim on how you ought to behave toward animals once we're equal in traits and sentience, you are then actually going back on the equalization momentarily to then make the claim, because you would be a human making a human value judgment about how we ought to pursue this kind of thing. If we ought to treat animals, okay, yeah. So, and the other one is probably the NTT, which we'll probably get into. How much time do I have?
You still have over 4 minutes.
Oh, great. Okay. So yeah, the name, the trait, the infamous dialogue tree that a lot of vegans take, it basically calls the meat eater to ask or name a particular or set of traits that give humans moral consideration and not the animal. The person, in this case, me, is led to either a contradiction or to bite a bullet by committing a seemingly absurd fallacy, or no, conclusion, I'm sorry, not fallacy. But the reason I say seemingly is because it's not logically absurd, whatever that bit bullet is. It's just silly consequence of the new invented reality. keep in mind, every time I've run through this dialogue tree, it's not an internal critique of my current view and positions here in this place, Earth, this reality. It's an invented reality out there that may exist somehow in your imagination. Most of the time, this is producing the seemingly absurd conclusion. Most of the time is as a result of accepting an absurd hypothetical of other worlds introduced. Many times, the world that's introduced is actually contrary to the in this case my position. So I'd have to, and many times I have to abandon my worldview to then entertain this new world. So when you play that game, but even so, right? Even if if the conclusion when you bite the bullet is seemingly absurd, it's not necessarily unethical. The interesting thing about name the trait is that once you get to that seemingly absurd conclusion, it's actually on the vegan to then tell us why it's absurd. Now, if it just sounds silly to most people, then that's not really an argument. That's just incredulity, right? It might be convincing, but that's not to say it might not be convincing. It's just that it's not logically absurd. And so the vegan often has to go to other world hypotheticals, where in this debate, I will try my best to keep it in real world hypotheticals to render the vegan's position absurd.
Thank you so much for that opening. Vegan Gains, the clock is reset. You have 7 minutes. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we have thousands of years of human history where I think over time we've developed not only social contracts between each other, implicit moral agreements, but we ended up codifying into law that is protected by people, their governments, and institutions, rights for ourselves, rights for each other. And I think those rights, for the most part, have been beneficial to us. They've protected us, and our communities and humanity as a whole. And I think it's only logical to extend those rights to beings that can also think and feel and benefit from those rights just like we can. If aliens were to come to Earth who could think and feel and looked similar to us, I think we would probably all agree they should have similar rights and protections under law that we would, and I think other beings that currently exist on our planet should also have those rights, like the cows, chickens, and pigs that we currently eat today. I have yet to see a meaningful moral distinction between ourselves and the animals that we eat that would justify eating those animals, but not justify eating our fellow human beings. And when people do attempt to make a meaningful moral distinction, and they point to something like the degree to which animals are sentient, to the degree to which they are intelligent, so forth, traits such as those, if we find human beings with comparable levels of sentience or intelligence or lacking in some sort of aptitude, most people are not comfortable with killing and eating those human beings. So people who are mentally disabled, for instance. So, yes, I'm going to request that my debate opponent point out these moral meaningful distinctions, and we'll test to see whether or not he's logically consistent with his moral views, whether or not he'd be okay with taking away human rights, and holocausting millions, perhaps even billions, of his fellow human beings just so that he has a logically consistent basis for going to McDonald's and eating a burger.
All right, thank you for that opening. I understand rhetoric's important in a debate, but if we could stay away from that particular word, YouTube TOS gets pretty upset with us when we mention the H word. I've actually gotten channel problems
just
from
by
it.
mentioning it.
Just by saying the word, yeah.
Say
That's
burnt
bizarre.
offering.
Yeah, that's fine. Whatever else you want to call it. I don't know why they just do. It's ridiculous. But anyway, gentlemen, the floor is open. Go ahead.
I'd like to start by when you say rights, right? So if I were to ask you, let's say there was a wolf walking through the woods and then it saw a stream and a big old fish, would you say the wolf is violating the fish's rights by eating it?
Yes.
Okay. If a bear was chasing you, would you justify defending yourself and killing the bear because it's about to
Yes,
eat you?
absolutely.
Okay. Okay. Would you kill the wolf and stop the wolf from eating the fish?
So, I understand the question you're trying to ask. Fish are typically carnivorous, and aquatic ecosystems can be kind of complex. So,
But
if
would
the
you
wolf,
would you defend the
well,
fish's rights?
in principle, yes, but let me explain. I do believe carnivorous animals should be stopped from violating others' rights. Now, when it comes to fish, just so people understand my position better, um, fish can be like most fish are carnivorous. So, a carnivorous fish that's higher up on the food chain may consume other carnivorous fish that are lower on the food chain. So, by killing the carnivorous fish that's at the top of the food chain, you may actually end up with a greater degree of rights violations. But in principle, yeah, the idea that another animal killing another animal, yeah, I'd stop the other animal from killing another animal.
So you'd kill the wolf from eating the fish in
Or a
defense of the
deer.
fish's
Right, or a
rights?
deer to make
Okay.
things more simple, yeah.
And
VG, can you turn your mic up just a bit? I'm sorry,
You got my
you're a little bit
mic
low.
up? Sure.
Yeah.
okay, and then if you were to not kill the wolf, but would you do like a citizen's arrest? Would you detain the wolf? And what would be the process of a rights violation for an animal like a wolf?
Can you repeat that? Sorry, you cut out
If
for me.
oh, sorry, if you intervened with the wolf and the fish, but you didn't kill the wolf, and you somehow got it trapped in a net, what would be the process of going through the justice system of rights violations between animals?
Well, since animals do not have the level of intelligence that we do, it would basically be a similar process to how we might deal with a human being that's severely mentally disabled if they killed somebody. Um, we could either institutionalize them, so like keep a wolf in captivity, feed it like vegan dog food. That would be ideal. If there isn't a system where we could keep a wolf in captivity and it would just, the only other option is to let it loose and kill other animals, then yeah, I'd kill it.
Okay, and then so if let's hypothetically say everybody decides to go vegan, would the next logical step would be to fully intervene with animal to animal aggression?
Um, if there was an interest in doing so, we could. Like again, I'm in favor of killing carnivorous animals in cases where it would cause a rights violation. And to be clear, I don't think we have any obligation to uh, prevent rights, or sorry, intervene in rights violations. The only obligation we have is to not violate another creature's rights.
And then when do you determine that creature's rights? I mean, a fish is pretty low on the, I would say
Yeah,
you would agree on the sentient scale. Where does the sentient, well, can you
somewhat
define
low, yeah.
sentience is for you?
Yeah, so sentience is the ability to have a conscious experience or a
And how,
subjective experience.
okay, and then how do you distinguish that from reactivity to stimuli?
Well, again, it's a conscious experience. It's not simply intelligence. Another way to put it would be a subjective experience.
Well,
That might,
well, I'm saying the question is how do you distinguish between an experience and a reactivity to external stimuli?
how do you determine, like logically deduce?
Well, how do you? I mean, making the claim that there's a distinction between,
Right.
let's say, a
Well,
snail. You touch
again,
a
the
snail.
distinction, yeah, like I know, like, yeah, you can cut a blade of grass, it'll release chemicals
Mhm,
versus, like, I don't know, stabbing a fish.
mhm.
The way you logically deduce is based on whether you can determine whether the creature is having a subjective experience. So a blade of grass can release chemicals and intelligently react to stimuli. That doesn't mean it's having a subjective experience where it's consciously aware of itself, its surroundings, and what's happening to it. Kind of like
Uh,
how a computer, like you can send an email, the computer will intelligently react to that email, give you a notification. That doesn't mean that the computer is conscious.
right, but the computer has a mind, and so if you're saying that
What do you mean by mind?
Well, you're assuming a mind, right? Because the
No, I'm
distinction
not.
actually, yeah, because you're not, you still haven't
I'm
made
not assuming a mind in all cases. What do you mean?
well, you're assuming there is a distinction between a mechanism just playing out its chemical activity and an experience, which is the thing watching that reaction, that experience, that thing that's occurring. So, in other words, if I touch something and it reacts and it responds and it like curls up, the difference, I haven't heard the difference or the distinction between the snail's body or chemicals reacting to the external world and then the experience, which is a qualitative assessment of what just occurred. That's it's almost like a post hoc thought process about the experience. It makes a judgment about the experience. It makes a future, perhaps a
Okay.
future notion of the experience. And so I
Let
don't think you get out of the
I'll
mechanism.
okay, I'll try to
Negative.
explain this in a way that maybe you can more easily understand. If you were to cut your own finger off, you would feel the experience of your finger being severed. You'd feel the pain. Nerve endings would be, excited and send a signal up to your brain. And then through that whole process in your brain where it sends signals to the pain receptors and shit, you interpret these things as subjective experiences like pain, shock,
What about people who are
horror,
not born with pain?
fear. Sorry?
What about people who aren't born with the ability to feel
Well,
pain?
then there will be other experiences related to that. Even people who are born without pain, which is a rare genetic disorder, they still have sense of touch. So they will feel their finger being severed. It's just not going to result in a pain response, and they'll also be able to see or
So you're
maybe
saying
hear. So well, let me finish. But if you were to take said severed finger and poke it, yeah, there's cells in there. You might actually, in some cases, be able to get the finger to move around and twitch if you prod it with electricity. You can do that with dead frogs. That doesn't mean the finger itself is experiencing anything just because it reacts to whatever stimuli you give it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm asking, is that how do you determine the difference between reactivity and thoughtful conscious experience?
Okay, well, that's what I asked you first, whether or not you were asking me to like how we deduce whether something's intelligent merely or sentient. The easiest way to do that would probably be to ask it if it's sentience, if it's sentient. A human being can certainly answer that question. Other animals, because they lack language or an ability to communicate, they probably won't be able to tell you, but there will be indications of sentience.
So
if they have a brain, nervous system, similar structures to ours, if they react to noxious stimuli, that's typically a way researchers determine whether or not something is sentient. So if they have these structures and they can react to noxious stimuli, and the reaction to that noxious stimuli is similar or identical to the way that we react to noxious stimuli, that pretty much deduces that they are sentient. I mean, we could argue we can't possibly know another mind, but then you could say that same thing about other human beings. I mean, some human beings could just be machines reacting to stimuli, and to some degree we are. We are just machines reacting to stimuli. It's just that we're
do you
assuming that
believe
other
that?
people have. Well, we're making an assumption that there are other minds, and I think that's a reasonable assumption to make.
Okay, but would you say a mind would then be outside or can't be tied down to just strict physical activity?
I have not seen any compelling evidence that there are like souls or spirits or something
No,
that
I
are
didn't say
also.
that. I'm just
Yeah.
saying if that's the case, let's say if vegan gains, if you really thought you were just kind of like a wet machine, right, that was in constantly reacting to external stimuli, and as complex as it might be, that even your thoughts and your reasoning and any sort of propositions you make about the external world or your experience would also just necessarily be reactivity. Like it would just
Yeah.
be the unfolding of a process that's pretty much bound to like the laws of
Well,
physics.
I'm agnostic as to whether or not we have free will or if we're living in a deterministic universe. I think there's a better argument for determinism than free will, but I'm agnostic.
Well, if determinism was true, the consequence would be that you wouldn't know it to be the case because any knowledge about it would be impossible because it would be determined. Everything you thought and said would be already a part of a process unfolded. But I
Well,
don't want to get off track of
yeah,
veganism.
yeah,
Let's
sure.
get back to sentient. Would you say that like these new robots, the silly ones that like on Jimmy Fallon that talk and
No.
would you say that it might, just say like robots that they try to model after human beings? If those became in your parameters, met your parameters for sentient, would you allot rights to the robots?
Yeah, so machines don't have a brain, nervous system, nociceptors. So the way we would determine sentience in a machine might actually be quite a bit different than the way we determine sentience in a biological organism because they don't have similar structures. And you can program a machine to act as though it's sentient. You could put sensors on its body, and if you poke it, it could react in a painful
But
manner. So
okay,
it
but
really
if
entirely depends. I think you'd have to determine that on a hardware and code level.
right, but if human beings are, in your view, just a machine, then it would be possible completely to model a robot and have them uh, fully experience not just pain, but the interpretation of pain, the preference to not feel pain, the preference for pleasure. Because in your view, it would just be a matter of coding consequences into the system, right? If this, then
Possibly.
that, right?
I mean, I'm not an AI specialist, but I mean in theory it makes logical sense. We could create, say, a simulation that perfectly models like human consciousness, or I don't know if you've ever played Fallout 4, where they literally make human beings with a 3D printer. Yeah, it's possible.
We gotta thread the needle back to veganism here.
Yeah,
Okay.
but let's just talk about the salient point. Like, what's the moral distinction between humans and animals where you think it's okay to create a burnt offering of billions of animals so that you can have a burger versus not giving human beings the same treatment? And if we were to find that meaningful trait or set of traits
Mm.
that a human is lacking, that animals also lack, why would you be okay with killing human beings of that nature?
Uh,
Um,
no, I don't. I don't locate a single or even a set of particulars. Certainly not properties of nature to create sort of like a bundle that equals the human and how I value the human. But the problem is with that position that you just offered is that someone could just be amoral, and it would still be on you, the vegan, to tell me. What is it about you as a human being, vegan gains, that gives you a moral priority in your claims to not eat meat? So if you equalized animals and humans, we would still be left asking, well, should humans just act more like animals, or should
well, I already
animals act
gave
like
my
humans?
preference.
Right. If it's preference, then it's arbitrary, right?
Well, yeah, to some degree, anybody's preferences are going to be arbitrary. You have a preference towards Christianity, like, okay.
Right. But then if it's just preference, you wouldn't really need a moral
Well, I believe in
justification.
logical consistency. So, well,
So
yeah, sure, you don't
do you
necessarily
prefer
need.
logical consistency?
Yeah.
Okay.
Um, okay, I know you're a presuppositionalist, right? We can go down that rabbit hole.
No, because I'm not making a theistic argument.
Well, you're making the same argument that I am. It's just that you're presupposing a God or Christianity or whatever set of beliefs you
No,
have,
I
whereas
told you.
I'm
No, I could be
presupposing my own preferences.
no, I could be amoral. I said I could say eating meat,
Right.
eating animals, neither here nor there, and you have to tell me as the vegan to say no. You shouldn't eat animals for this reason.
Well, yeah, if you believed that it is, you don't care about killing and eating animals, you don't care about human beings,
How would it change if
Um,
I just said I prefer to eat animals from your preference to not, right? You already admitted it's arbitrary and preference based.
I think we're already assuming that you have the preference to eat animals because you aren't vegan. But the thing is, you believe in human rights, do you not?
No.
You don't believe in human rights. Is this in the hypothetical, or do you like actually not believe in human rights?
No, rights themselves are mostly a legal system. And so like
Right.
murder rights and so there's a system and structure that has consequences. And what rights really are is a uniform it doesn't do a good job, but it's the attempt at a standardized system of justice and its processes. And
Sure.
it's after the activity, right? So
No.
no, I don't really buy into rights. I think life is a gift. Not we don't have a right to life. We're given a gift of life, and so that's why I find a problem with even the
I
argument to extend human rights to animals. Not just because I deny the right itself, but it all falls apart with my example of the the wolf and the you have the right to kill the bear, right? In self
yeah.
defense,
Okay.
right?
Right.
But yeah, but then the wolf, you have to process the wolf. You don't go to jail for killing the bear in self-defense, right? But the bear has to go to jail in your view for just eating a fish. Like that's where your
I'm.
conclusion lands you, right? Is that you
I,
have to
I'm. I.
detain the bear.
Well, I mean, bears do not have the level of intelligence that we have, where we can hold them responsible for their actions the way a human being can. And again, if we were to trait equalize a human being who is, say, mentally disabled to the point where they're comparable to a bear,
So you would starve a bear
we,
if you had the ability to stop it from eating fish.
yeah,
Yeah,
like
great.
again, I've given like fish is a weird example. I'd rather use deer just so it's more clear, but yeah, in principle, yes.
Okay, so would you then a mother who starves her child, you don't think they should go to jail then?
That's not what I said, and I don't know how that logically leads to that point.
Well, because you said you would starve the bear if you could from
Okay,
eating to survive.
well, look, here's my position. I don't think vampires, zombies, or ghouls should kill and eat people. Would you starve a zombie, a vampire, or a ghoul? Like, the point is, we're trying to prevent rights violations.
Yeah, but
So,
the bear is defending its life by eating.
yeah, sure, okay.
So you are actually killing a bear by intervening with its ability to feed itself. How is
Yeah,
that not starvation? How is that not
so,
starvation?
well, I didn't say it's not starvation.
Then you should go to jail for then intervening with the bear's ability
No,
to feed itself.
no, okay, should police go to jail for stopping a serial killer?
No, because that's a law.
Okay.
That's not in nature.
Okay, well, let's say
There's no rights in nature.
okay, well, that's just question begging. My whole argument is
What's
that
a right?
there should be.
What's a right? You saying rights is question begging. What's a
Look,
right?
look, this is question begging. The whole argument is to extend rights to animals. So by saying that they don't have rights, that's literally begging the question. So I don't know what else to tell you if you're not getting this.
Okay.
So to back up, can you be clear? What do you think the part is that's being question begging?
Well, right. So the debate is whether or not rights should be extended to animals. My argument is that based on similar characteristics that animals and humans share, they should be extended to animals. He's saying that because animals don't have any rights, they should not have any rights. It's question begging.
I'm saying I don't see any rights. Like you
Right,
haven't
it's
justified
question
these rights.
begging.
You haven't justified what rights are. That's not question begging. You're claiming rights.
Sorry, well,
I'm asking what's a right and where do they come from?
Yeah, that's true.
Well, right, they have to be granted. And
Granted
my
for who?
argument is that they should be granted on the basis of trait similarity. And I think we should probably get through this by running Name the Trait. So what is the trait that is lacking in animals that if lacking in human beings would justify taking away human rights?
It's not a trait.
Okay, well, it would have to be.
No, it wouldn't.
Yes, it would have to be.
It's a category.
You're making a separation between humans and animals, so there
Yeah.
is a trait or set of trait.
Are humans animals?
Well, yeah, they are.
So
We're
you
talking
just made
about
the separation.
we're talking about human and non-human animals.
If animals and humans were exactly the same, then
Right.
you wouldn't
So
know the
you agree
difference between them.
so you agree there's trait differences.
Yeah, there's a category difference. It's not even a trait difference. It's a whole category.
Okay, so what's the category difference?
Being a human is not being an animal or a bear or
Oh,
a fish.
okay. So are you talking about species? Are you talking about some other kind of concept?
No, well, I mean, a human being is, in my view, made in the image of God. Where that's a whole other category.
Okay.
It's not, animals aren't.
Okay, so so that's the salient trait. Being made in the image of God.
Well, I don't think it's a trait. No.
Well, that is a trait.
No, it's a transcendental category. It's not a trait. Trait would be reduced to some particulars.
Well, a trait can be a more complex concept. Like, obviously, the concept of species is more complex than the concept of color.
Right. Those are natural properties. Made in the image of God is not a natural property.
Well, it doesn't matter if it's a natural property or not. I'm just asking you, is that the salient trait? Is the reason you're okay with killing animals is because they're not made in the image of God?
Yes.
Okay. Then, if there was a supposed human being that was not made in the image of God, you'd be okay with killing those human beings.
Impossible in my worldview.
Absolutely is possible.
How is it possible?
Well, God could not exist.
That's impossible.
Okay, well, you're saying it's logically impossible for there to not be a God.
No, I'm saying it's logically impossible for a human being to exist that's not made in the image of God. And
well, it is because God could not exist.
Could? No, I don't.
Yeah, it's possible there is no God.
No, I don't think you can justify that claim.
Okay, are you fallible?
Me? Yeah, I'm fallible.
So you could be wrong.
No. No,
you're right about everything. You're right about everything.
No, you listen. It's your claim. You have to have full access to
My claim is that it's possible for you to be wrong as to whether or not a God exists.
No, forget me. You said it's possible for God not to exist. You haven't actually established that.
I don't need to. It is logically possible that a God could not exist.
No, it's not.
Well, and by the way, we don't even have to argue on that level. The claim you're making is that God made us in his image. It's possible that God made us, just not in his image. Like, so is it possible that God made us but not in his image?
I don't think so.
Okay, you don't think so. So now you're not making so certain of a claim.
Well, no, I'm saying that to even explore that, you'd have to take a metaphysical. It's not just like a straight prop logic. You'd have to explore what it even means.
Okay. Are you a fallible being? Could you be right or wrong?
I could be right or wrong, yeah, but not
right.
About
okay, so you could be wrong that God made us in his image, and you could be wrong that God even exists.
Nope.
Okay, how is it possible that you cannot be wrong about that?
Because the concept of right and wrong, logic, reasoning, language, regularity in nature, all of the stuff that you are appealing to, like metaphysics, concepts, these things could not exist without God in an intelligible way. Therefore, even asking the question, you're actually borrowing a whole category of things that you can't even justify yourself. According to your view, by the way. Hold on. Your view is that you're a wet machine. You can't even account for epistemology, let alone whether it's right or wrong to put a bear in jail.
Okay, like, again, we've gone through this. You're a presuppositionalist Christian. You're just presupposing the existence of God. It's not based on any...
rights.
Well, yeah. I presuppose other minds. Like, there are things that we have to presuppose, but you're just choosing to presuppose a God.
Hold on, vegan. What's a mind in a strictly physical universe?
Well,
you still haven't distinguished between reactivity and mind.
I don't have to answer that question.
If you use if you use the term mind, yes, you do.
No, I don't.
Yes,
I don't have to answer the question of what a mind is.
Sure you do.
What you have to answer is how the hell is it possible that you, as a fallible being, cannot possibly be wrong about whether or not a God created us in his image?
Because I already told you the concept of right and wrong, logic, truth requires God.
No, I could say the concept of logic, truth, right and wrong requires penis. I
No,
could presuppose anything. You're just choosing to
incorrect.
presuppose God.
No. Penis is a physical thing. It exists physically. It's
Okay,
not
magic penis,
that
interdimensional penis.
How does-
Like,
okay,
you
hold on,
can
hold on,
presuppose
hold
anything.
No, you can't. Here, I'll ask you why. How does the your magic penis justify the laws of logic?
Laws of logic.
Yeah, how does it justify the existence of the laws of logic? Regularity in nature. How does your
How do you
magic
know
penis,
logic exists?
we assume it.
There you go.
It's ridiculous to.
There you go.
What? Yeah.
You literally just said we assume it.
Yeah, we do assume.
What does this have to do with God?
But how does that refute anything?
I've never
you
seen
assume
a
right.
presuppositionalist Christian
You
who's
assume-
actually answered that question wrong.
We all assume things. Okay,
Buddy,
buddy,
you literally
you
just
assume a
proved my
mind.
point.
You assume a mind, and you didn't justify a mind in your strictly materialistic view.
You literally just proved my point.
You can't prove
you are
points without
trying to
minds.
make the argument. You were trying
can't
to make
prove
the
points.
argument that all these things come from God, and then you just admitted you assume it. So
I
your
can't-
assumptions could be wrong.
No, dude, I can't assume anything without vegan. I can't assume anything without a mind or the laws of logic, reasoning, concepts, language, math. Right, the concept of truth. So you saying you
assume all those things. You just admit it. You just admitted it.
In order to assume them, there's no way around it. It's completely circular. We can't assume the law. We can't question the laws of logic without assuming them, right?
Yeah, I agree.
And what's assuming? What's the thing doing it? Is it a machine?
I don't know, but we are assuming it. We
Who is
agree on that point.
Who is we? What's the thing that's assuming animal rights or human rights in your view?
Us.
No, who is you? What is you? Is it a machine?
I don't know, and I don't have to answer that question.
Yes, you do, because
that's
yes.
not
I'll tell you why.
not a salient point.
I'll tell you why it is because if you're physicalist, are you a physicalist in this?
I don't know what that means.
Just all that exists is matter, physicalism. You're just a machine.
I don't know.
Okay. So the problem is when you getting it back to veganism. Let's say you go back to sentience, right? You assume a mind that's distinct from reactivity, right? That's what you assume, right?
It's not necessarily distinct from reactivity. What I define as sentience is the ability to have a subjective experience. Doesn't mean it's distinct from reactivity.
Is it possible for a house to have a subjective experience, a smart house?
Like, again, it's logically possible if we developed a sentient AI that's controlling the house.
So if that was the case, would you give houses rights?
If they were sentient, then possibly. If they had a meaningful degree of sentience.
And then you wouldn't be able to take down the house and rebuild a new one because you'd be violating the house's rights.
Correct.
Yeah.
Like, assuming it has a substantive degree of sentience.
Uh-huh. Okay. So, I mean, I guess we can just go because that conclusion, right? It's like you don't know what sentience is, where it starts.
Okay, buddy,
where
you're wandering off from the point that you just embarrassed yourself on. So again, you admitted that it's possible that a God did not create us in his own image.
No, I didn't.
You admitted that's an assumption you're making.
You didn't understand. I can't make an assumption without grounding the possibility of assumptions. Now, in my view, you can't even make assumptions.
Right, so you could be wrong about everything. You agree. If it's an assumption, you could be wrong.
I can't be wrong about the necessary preconditions for there even being the possibility of things being right or wrong. You understand? We're not even operating
You're
on the
assuming
thing of
that.
No.
Yes,
I'm
you
using
are.
logic. That's the only way it can go.
You're
right?
assuming that there is such a thing as logic. You admitted that.
To assume anything is to assume logic already. So that's like a redundant.
Okay.
Can you think
you're
without?
still
Can you
assuming.
think without it?
Well,
Assuming.
can you think without logic? I mean, possibly.
Okay, and now we're back to the mind, right? Because you need a mind to assume something, and you can't justify a mind, and no one can justify a mind without God. You can't even tell me what it is.
You're assuming God exists. You're assuming
What's
you
a
have a
mi-
mind. You're assuming logic. You literally admitted you're assuming all these things.
Okay,
So if it's an assumption, then you would
This
have
isn't
to agree
vegan
that
gains.
you
This
could
is
be wrong.
this is not an argument on God's existence. You're
Well,
trying to take
let
it
me
off
let
the
me
fact
ask
that
you
you just
this.
defended House's rights.
Well, let me ask you this: Are you God?
Mm-mm.
So could you? Is it possible for you to not know God's mind?
I'd never claimed to know God's mind.
Okay. So if you don't claim to know God's mind, then it is possible that God did not make you or any other person in his image.
No, that doesn't follow.
You don't know his mind.
I know his purpose for us.
Okay, you're lying. You're a
How do you-
clown, dude. Okay, look, if you're not going to admit this, I think the
How's
debate's over.
Houses have rights, but I'm the clown.
Look, you're a clown. You admitted you're making all of these things are assumptions. You admitted that you do not know God's mind, and again, that's just an admission that this is an assumption that God
no.
made you in his image. So
You're
you're
making massive-
even refusing
No.
to acknowledge that it's possible. I'm not even arguing whether or not God exists.
You're
I'm just
making a
arguing the
category
point
error.
that it's possible that God did not make you in his image. And you won't even admit that, even though along the entire way you said all of these things are assumptions and you do not know God's mind.
You're making a category error.
No.
Yes, you are.
Please explain.
Knowing God's mind is not the same of knowing God's plan or purpose for us.
Okay, that doesn't
I don't need
matter.
to know. I don't need to know your whole mind, vegan gains, to know that you would put a wolf in jail if it ate a fish.
Okay, great.
So therefore, you're
literally has nothing to do with what I just said.
It does, because you're assuming I need to know fullness of God's mind, right? I have to know God's mind to come to the conclusion that God's necessary for thinking, for any sort of intelligibility.
Yeah, so again, you assume that God exists. You assume that that he created us in his image. You assume all of these other things like logic. So you would have to agree that it's possible that you're wrong on these things.
Okay, fine, I'll grant it. Just for the
Okay,
sake
cool.
of moving on
So,
back to veganism.
okay, great. Okay, so then it is possible that there are human beings that were not made in God's image.
Not on this, not in my view on this planet, no.
Okay,
That's
so
fine.
gay people, transsexuals, they're made in God's image. Is God gay or a tranny?
No, gay is a activity.
Well, gay isn't an activity. It's also
is.
a sexuality.
No, you can't have sex with the same sex. Sorry, that's irrational.
You can have sex with the same
No,
sex.
you can't. Where's the sexual organ that how's that work? Can you have sex with a guitar?
You ever heard of docking?
Can you have sex with a guitar?
Like we can get...
Yes or no?
So probably not.
Okay.
I guess it depends on how you mean sex. Like, do you mean
I mean it the way that
interacting
everybody.
between sexual organs?
No, I mean.
Okay. Do you believe
sexual-
in the concept of oral sex?
No, that wouldn't be considered sex. No.
Okay, so if two people wanted to remain
How's that-
virgins up until marriage, you'd
How's that have to do
say
with
anal
veganism?
sex and oral sex wouldn't break somebody's virginity.
Let's get back to veganism.
Well, no, sorry. So do you believe that people should remain virgins until marriage?
Sure.
Okay, so if a girl wanted to get fucked up her ass or suck a dude's dick, that wouldn't violate like a virginity oath?
Maybe not necessarily virginity, but it would still be as sinful. It would be.
Okay, well, okay, sorry.
Sorry.
So you don't consider that sex?
No, it's not actually sex. No, it's mutual masturbation.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, continue.
Yeah. So I still haven't heard why. The reasoning of why anyone should be vegan.
Yeah.
All you've done so far is try to
Right.
extend
So
a non
we've established the
rights.
salient. Okay, we've established the salient trait, which is made in the image of God. You admitted that it's possible that you could not be made in the image of God. So if no one was made in the image of God, you'd be fine with holocausting everybody. What if it was just certain people like Jews?
Just watch.
Sorry, yeah,
the
the H word, sorry.
Yeah.
So if Jews were not made in the image of God, you'd be fine with wiping them out and turning them into cheeseburgers?
The distinction, I mean, I still haven't heard why wiping out pigs is wrong. So why would it matter?
You
For
literally
humans?
made the salient distinction, the
Yeah, why would it
trait,
matter?
which is made in the image of God. So
Yeah, what would it matter? There'd be no morality. It would just be, fight for your life and eat whatever you want.
well, no, I said that suppose only Jews were not made in the image of God. So you'd be fine with turning them all into cheeseburgers.
No, because that would presuppose that God made someone in their image. So God would
Right,
exist.
it would be you and I
No,
don't know, other
No, because for that to exist, for that to be the case, then God would exist, and now you're inventing a new God that's not even my you're not doing an internal critique
Okay,
of my
so
position.
again, we can go through this whole thing again. You can't know God's mind. You're making assumptions about all this. You could be wrong. So, assuming that God only made you and other people like you in his image, but Jews were not made in God's image, you'd be fine with turning them into cheeseburgers.
I probably wouldn't know how to distinguish that if that were the case, because humans are all,
Well,
in my
suppose you
view, they're
could.
all made.
Suppose God told you they're not
I
made in
could
his image.
I could suppose that carrots cry at night when they sleep because they have bad dreams. Who gives a shit about what?
Okay, well, it's funny you say this, which is it's a complete double standard. Well, how would I know if somebody is or isn't made in God's image? Okay, well then you fucking just proved my point that you can't know whether or not somebody is made in God's image.
No.
But you made a big deal about this.
No, because I hold that all people are made in God's image.
Right, but you can't know. So if there were supposedly somebody who wasn't made in God's image, you wouldn't know.
It wouldn't be.
So this works both ways. This works both ways.
No, dude, it wouldn't be possible in my worldview. You're just inventing possible other worlds that doesn't apply to my worldview.
Well, that's fine. That's fine. So you've already admitted that you could be wrong, that we're made in God's image. It could be the case that only some people are made in God's image. So again, I'm asking you,
that's like
if
asking
Jews were not made in God's image, would you be okay with turning them into cheeseburgers?
I wouldn't know the distinction between one.
You would, because in the hypothetical you would know. So would you be okay with turning Jews into cheeseburgers if they were not made in God's image?
I wouldn't recognize them as human.
Okay, so you'd be fine with turning them into cheeseburgers.
No, I wouldn't recognize them as human.
Right, so you'd be fine with turning them into cheeseburgers.
I don't know if they would be good cheeseburgers.
Okay, so you'd be fine with turning them into cheeseburgers.
I don't know if they would be good cheeseburgers.
Well, I'm not asking you whether or not they'd be good cheeseburgers. I'm asking you whether or not you'd be fine with turning them into cheeseburgers.
I don't know. Maybe something more useful and long-term, durable.
Okay, I don't know. Bacon, fucking anything. You'd be fine with turning Jews into cheeseburgers if they were not made in God's image.
I wouldn't. If they weren't made in God's image, I don't know what they would be.
Okay, so again, you're dodging the question.
No, I wouldn't know what they
I'm
were.
asking you whether or not you would have a moral issue with turning Jews into cheeseburgers if they were not made in God's image.
If they weren't made in God's image, maybe they would look like a carrot.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it does.
It doesn't matter.
No,
okay,
it does.
again,
here's the problem.
We already went through this. You admitted that it's possible that no one is made in God's image.
Assuming,
so assuming you still hold this principle, you'd be fine with wiping out every fucking human on Earth.
What's a human then? So would you. What are you talking about? You have no you don't even have a reason why not to kill other humans.
The salient point that you made, the trait that you named, was being made in God's image. It has nothing to do with being human. You just said being made in God's image. So a cow could be made in God's image.
No, not in my
Cows could be made in God's image.
Not in my view.
Well, not
in your view.
Again, that's an assumption, isn't it?
No, it's
that you're assuming that.
No,
you literally admitted you're
don't.
assuming all of these things, which is why you agreed earlier. You conceded.
No, I don't assume those things. Like I said, I assume the laws of logic.
Right, so you assume the laws of logic, you assume God exists, and you assume that God made us in his image, which is what you conceded earlier. So now you're backtracking?
The problem is you still can't tell me, even if that were the case, why it would be wrong to kill other humans or animals.
This is your moral view. You said the meaningful difference. You said the meaningful difference between humans and non-human animals is being made in God's image. So if Jews were not made in God's image, you'd be fine with turning Jews into cheeseburgers.
I already told you, if that wasn't the case, that would require me to abandon my entire worldview. So it's not my worldview. You're asking me to go vegan. You're
Okay,
hold on. Let me finish. What you're doing is saying, Jimbob, if you didn't believe your worldview and your worldview wasn't your worldview, would your worldview be consistent if it wasn't your worldview? That's all you're asking.
I'm not asking you to abandon your worldview. I'm testing your consistency on the principle that you said was meaningful, which is being made in God's image.
I already told you, if I abandoned made in God's image, I wouldn't be able to distinguish.
I'm not asking you to abandon that. I'm asking you. I'm trying to test your logical consistency, and apparently logic is something you believe in, but I'm not convinced yet.
You're doing a trick. Here's the trick. You're saying you're basically doing an identity a violation. So you sneakily, by the way, using the J's, right, for an effect, right? You're basically saying, Jimbob, everything you say in your worldview that means what it means to be human, right? Everything you believe. Let's just imagine there's these other humans, right, that aren't that, requiring me to abandon my view and making a judgment about the consequence of abandoning my view. Yeah, the consequence of abandoning my view would be inconsistency, but I'm not
asking you to abandon your view.
Yes, you are, because who are these creatures you're talking about?
Your view is that if you are made in God's image, you should be protected in some way, or you should have a right to life.
No.
Oh, okay. So you believe I should be able to go around and shoot other human beings? Do you think I should be able to kill your entire family?
You can actually.
Okay. Should I be able to?
No, you can. It's not. You're capable.
We all know we can and we're capable. Should you be allowed to? Yeah. Should you be allowed to? Do you think it's moral to do so?
No, it's not moral to do so.
Okay, so it's immoral. Okay, so it's immoral.
Yes, but you're allowed to.
Well, sure. Like we all know, I could piss on my own face. Yeah, sure, I can do that. Is it moral to go out and kill your family?
No.
Okay, so that's what I'm asking. In your worldview, you just said you conceded to this. The distinction between humans and non-human animals that makes it moral to kill animals, immoral to kill human beings, is being made in the image of God. Okay, well, you admitted that you're assuming that all humans are made in the image of God. You could be wrong about that. It could be that Jews aren't made in the image of God. Maybe cows are the only ones made in the image of God.
Not in my worldview.
Do you think? Well, no.
It's not possible in my
worldview. Sorry. It is your belief that Jews are made in the image of God along with you. That's not your worldview necessarily.
Yes,
that's your belief, and you admitted that belief could be wrong. So supposing your belief was wrong and Jews were not made in the image of God, would you be okay with turning them into cheeseburgers?
No, you're just.
Would you be okay with turning Jews into cheeseburgers if they were not made in the image of God?
It's a nonsensical.
Would you be okay with turning Jews into cheeseburgers if they were not made in the image of God?
Nonsensical.
Would you be okay with turning Jews into cheeseburgers if they were not made in the image of God? Okay, then debate's over. Debate's over.
Is that how it
I'm
worked?
done. I'm done. So you lost. You're a clown.
Oh, is that how?
You're dishonest. No, you're just dishonest, and it's a waste of my time. So wrap it up.
That's it.
That's it. I'm done. You're a waste of my time.
Okay. So if I said. No,
you're a waste of my time. I'm done. I don't care what you say. You're an idiot.
Oh.
Okay. Well, I mean, if you're done, you're done. There's we're not ready to get to the calls of the supers just yet, so that's totally up to you. I can't hold you here. Obviously,
we can get to super chats and stuff like that, but yeah.
Well, I gotta run the flow out. We still got a half hour of this before I can even let callers in. So.
Let another vegan on. Get him out of here. Someone in the chat is a vegan.
It's up to you, VG.
I'm fine with kicking me off and inviting somebody else on, but I'm done. We can sit here and talk about something else if it's a big inconvenience to you, but we're done on the veganism topic.
Okay, well,
Like the guy's clearly dishonest, and I'm just gonna keep repeating myself, and he's refusing to answer. So he knows he lost.
That's not true.
well, the thing is
Quitting
yes,
is losing. Quitting is losing.
I'm not quitting. I've just
Yeah, you
proven
are.
that you're a dishonest person.
How
You're
did I lie?
incapable of
How did I
engaging in a
lie?
discussion,
How did I
and
lie?
it's pointless to continue.
How did I lie?
Well, everybody saw how you lied and how you're being dishonest and evasive.
Tell us.
So
Tell me.
no, we're done.
Where's
There's
the
no
lie?
point in telling
So you
you.
can't. So
There's
you can't
no
tell the lie.
point.
Dishonest, right?
Why would I bother wasting my time when you're a
Please.
dishonest person
How?
who cannot be reasoned with?
I am honest.
So I'm not going to bother.
I'm
You know,
telling you.
ask people from the audience what they think. Ask whoever else. I'm not engaging with you because you're just a dishonest person who's wasting my time.
I answered it honestly. I told you I wouldn't be able to distinguish what that would be, right?
Sure.
In my worldview, I wouldn't be able to distinguish it.
Sure.
Right.
Oh, I mean, all right. If it's wrapped up there, it's wrapped up there. Off to the chat. So we still got about 25 minutes before we open up the call lines. VG, I do appreciate you coming in. Kind of is what it is. If that's where you want to end it, that's where you want to end it. I can't, force you guys to engage, obviously. So I appreciate your time today. Did you want to shout your channel out before you went, or?
Yeah, like everybody can find me on YouTube Vegan Gains. Again, if this is really inconvenient for you, and I know you're running a business and shit here, I can stay around and discuss some other topic or something, or answer questions in the chat. But
well, maybe we can get
it's pointless.
Can we get if we can't stay on the vegan topic? There was an interesting part where we were getting into meta ethics. Can we follow up there?
Sure. If you want to have a discussion about some of that stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so a lot of this hinged on whether or not logic was assumed, and maybe we can kind of pick it up from that position. So, Jimbob, you want to?
Well, let me do something a little less meta than that, but still a little bit meta. Is that let's go with sentience, Vegan Gains. Let's say we could remove sentience, because sentience in your view would be the ability to feel pain and other experiences, including pleasure. So ought we not remove that? Because if you say well, don't kill the pig because it's sentient, if we were to figure out a way to remove the very thing that you define as sentient, is it okay to then kill them, right? Or if something's missing sentience and we could give them sentience, I wanted to know your answer to that. Ought we give something sentience, like the house example I gave?
Well, by killing a pig, you're removing its sentience. So by that nature, you're committing a rights violation. It's a type of death.
No, if I could remove it without killing it, obviously.
Well, it is a type of death. The conscious mind dies. Just because the body is alive, the conscious mind would still be dead. I'd see that as a rights violation.
And what's the conscious mind such that you know that it would die?
Well, it's stated in the hypothetical. I don't have to describe what a conscious mind is. You just outlined it in the hypothetical.
Okay. Do you believe in a conscious mind?
Yeah.
And you believe that's separate or independent of strictly mechanistic, neurological, biological reactions?
No, I don't believe it's necessarily independent.
Okay, so if everything was strictly just mechanistic input-output reactivity, how would you determine a value claim about the activity?
I don't know how that would be related.
Well, making a value claim and saying you ought to be sentience, or you ought not remove sentience, or you ought not harm things, I don't understand how you were going to make a distinction between reactivity, again, we're at the beginning, reactivity, and consciousness, which is thoughtfulness, mind, right? Mind, if its mind is identical to just brain matter smashing together, then you don't have really much to distinguish between a blade of grass, a Venus flytrap, and a pig, right? There's no threshold in which you determine when sentience begins.
Yeah, so you're kind of equivocating the practical issue of determining sentience in a being versus the hypothetical moral issue of eliminating sentience from a creature. So,
So you think there's a moral issue of just killing a sentient creature?
well, again, the question you asked me is whether or not I'd be fine with removing sentience from a being that's conscious, and I said yes, that would be death of its mind. It's a type of murder.
But it wouldn't
Um,
know. It wouldn't suffer.
well, right. I mean, if I shot you in the head with a high-powered rifle and your brains exploded really quickly, you wouldn't suffer either. It's a pretty quick death.
Yeah, I would prefer that kind of death. So what's your point?
You asked me on.
So you think we should shoot pigs with? I agree. Quick deaths, right to the head.
No.
I mean, that's kind of what you said.
You asked me whether or not I would find it immoral to remove sentience from a mind, or basically remove a mind. That's
Right.
really what you're saying.
Yeah, and you're saying sentience, the ability to die, feel suffering or pain. If the pig doesn't feel anything, it's like fully lobotomized. I don't know what you would then call suffering if you remove the preconditions for suffering being sentience. It wouldn't suffer
We
at all.
already went through this. I consider, well, the same would be true for humans. So you think it's okay to shoot humans in the head?
No, but shooting them
Right.
and removing their sentience such that they still exist is a different conversation.
So they would not exist.
So then you could eat them.
I like this is just a jumbled mess of nonsense. Like,
It's not
what do you
really.
want to?
If we remove,
Weren't we going to talk about like meta ethics or something?
it is. You're making a moral claim about sentience.
Well, right. So you could remove sentience from a human being by blowing their brains out with a high-powered rifle.
And so why is that bad from your view?
Well, I would consider that a rights violation.
What's a right?
So again, we can
Why
get
is
into question
violating-
begging.
Hold on. Why is violating a right immoral?
Sorry?
Why is violating a right immoral?
So, when I say something like rights, I'm using maybe somewhat more of a general term. You could remove somebody's right to, I don't know, smoke weed, something that's...
Or eat
I
fish
don't
in
know.
the woods as a bear.
Yeah, or eat fish, or smoke crack, or, I don't know, any number of things. Like, rights don't necessarily have anything to do with morality or positively affecting
So
a
then
being.
violating a right is
So
not
when I
immoral.
when I say violating somebody's rights, I am using a more general term where there's an idea that we ought to codify rights into law that we would want to have, that would protect ourselves, our communities, loved ones, and humanity as a whole.
Why ought
And-
we do that?
Sorry?
Why ought we do that?
Well, that's just my preference.
It's my preference to eat pigs.
Okay, great. And we went through this whole fucking rigmarole,
So your
and
whole
you
thing is
refused to
arbitrary.
answer. Right. Well, so we went through this whole rigmarole.
preference.
So again, we've already been through this, and you're just spouting. You're just
means
making yourself look foolish.
You mean your arbitrary stance and your ought just got reduced to arbitrary, right? But yet
Sorry.
your stance is that it's arbitrary. Therefore, your hypothetical where I kill the J people who are not made in the image of God is still not a problem, right? For you?
It is a problem for me.
No, it's a preference, right?
Well, yeah, and
immoral.
it's a problem for me.
Yeah, but it's not immoral. It's just it's
Well,
just like you eating licorice.
think it's immoral since you refuse to answer the question.
So it's just like eating licorice, from your view.
No. For my view, it's much worse than eating licorice. I just explained how this is my preference.
So it's like licorice and ketchup.
Okay, I think we should explore this difference in value system where correct me if I'm wrong, you believe that if these moral values are extended from a higher power like God, you believe they're meaningful versus...
Not
No?
necessarily. Meaningful is one term, but I would say any kind of values like morality, right? The good, truth itself. These are metaphysical. They're not like found in nature. They're not identical to objects in the world. And so once we assume them, they need to be grounded somehow unless from your perspective, one, that they're just preferences, but two, which is even a worse position, is that they're just consequences of your brain in action.
Okay, do you believe things like do you believe in the Ten Commandments?
I don't really follow the Ten Commandments as the priority, but why?
Well, okay, I understand that there's some Christians that don't believe in the Ten Commandments because it's an Old Testament value. Like, do you believe in the Golden Rule?
Not as it's currently argued. Not necessarily, no.
Oh,
Because
okay,
the reason
so
why, the reason is,
does God give us any sort of any sort of guidance on what is or isn't moral?
a guidance, yeah, I would say that's revealed in Scripture, but also in the life of Jesus Christ.
Okay. So what? Okay, so versus my personal preferences, where I think we shouldn't kill humans, we shouldn't kill animals, we shouldn't do things to violate other creatures' rights, all sorts of things like rape, torture, steal. Versus that coming from my personal preferences, why are my preferences somehow not meaningful, arbitrary, invalid, whatever words you want to use to describe it?
Okay.
Why is that lower than the moral values imposed upon by God?
One, because you have a worldview that assumes just physicality. So any notion
Not necessarily.
of
I'm agnostic.
Okay. Well, if you say something like, truth, assume truth, you assume propositions and logic and consistency, that we ought to be consistent. That itself is a moral claim that your view can't actually ground. But you're saying your worldview is just that it's arbitrary. So I don't have to. So your opponents don't have to be consistent.
Okay, well,
right?
when you say ground, I mean, again, you're presupposing that a god did this. Like, I could presuppose a frog did it. Like, I don't know what you mean by ground. Could you explain what you mean by ground?
I mean, let's say establish a source, a meaningful, coherent source for all the preconditions for the way we operate, think, argue.
Infinite magical frog, flying spaghetti monster, magic sky wizard, Santa Claus. Like, I could presuppose any of these things, and I could make it logically sensible.
Do it. Try it
in some way.
Try it.
But like when I'm asking,
no. Hold on. You just tried to counter my position by saying you could just make a water bottle or a magical frog, and you could make it sensible. But that was just an assumption. Let's hear how a magical frog...
Well, I could give them the same properties as your god that you suppose makes any of that grounds, and you still haven't explained to me what ground means.
Well, I told you, it's source in a meaningful way that's coherent. You assuming a frog or a spaghetti assumes
source in a meaningful way that's coherent, but wouldn't that be an assumption that it's coherent?
I would say the difference in your examples is that you're borrowing from the physical world.
Okay, you said in a coherent manner, that would be your assumption that it's coherent, correct?
Coherency, no, is not my opinion whether something's
coherent. It would be your assumption that something's coherent. You like, again, you're a fallible being, correct? So you could be wrong about something being coherent.
And if something was broken in my perception, perhaps, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So you're assuming that God is coherent?
God is coherent. I think God transcends coherence. He doesn't operate. He's not bound by the laws of logic.
Okay.
As a frog is though, because a frog has finite parts, and you understand the wholeness.
Not if it's a magic infinite frog.
A magic infinite frog. Well, we still know what a frog is, right?
Yeah. Okay. So, well, there are plenty of origin stories from other cultures that have like magical, immortal animals. Like, I could say, okay, well, God is a magical infinite frog, and he decided to create human beings and frogs.
Okay.
And all the other animals. Like, I mean...
How did he reveal himself?
Guys, we gotta...
Well, have you seen frogs? They're all over the place. Yeah,
they're physical and finite.
Okay. Frogs are made in the image of the all frog.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Like, we keep getting back to this, and I keep proving that you're making all of these assumptions, and you admit that they're not necessarily coherent, and then you're still stuck to this belief that there's this, like, I don't know, magical sky wizard with a beard who brought, like, his hippie son to talk about peace and love, but somehow not bring cures for diseases, even though he could cure them himself. Like,
toothache hurt, no God. Toothache hurt. Toothache hurt, no God real. What do you hang out on Reddit?
So
what's that?
So
my toe hurts. There's no God. What?
We do have to wrap the debate down now. We got to wind it down. I want to give both of you guys an opportunity to give a closing statement on this before we move into callers. Jimbob, you opened first. I'll let you close first so Vegan Gains can close last. Go ahead.
What was the topic of the debate, Andrew?
Well,
should we send
human
rights?
It was animal rights. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So if that was the topic of the debate, not whether or not God exists, right? The topic of the debate is whether or not we extend animal rights or human rights to animal rights. Now, a human right, I don't actually, he didn't even justify what a human right was. He said he didn't even have to. He didn't make the distinction between reactivity and mind. He couldn't tell me what a mind was, but he also made the claim that if we remove sentience from the animal, we're removing the mind, and that's immoral. And I said, what's a mind? It's really important for anyone who's arguing from this position of sentience. Once they define sentience as the ability to feel or experience, they must distinguish at some point the difference between a blade of grass, a Venus flytrap, a squirrel, a fish, and a bear. Now, if you can't distinguish where that is, right, and you can't tell me what a mind is, and you can't tell me what rights are, there's no possible way you're going to even tell me that we ought to offer up this concept of a human right, by the way, which I reject, to an animal. Now, he's gone as far as saying, we ought to shoot the bear if it's about to eat food. We ought to starve all bears who are trying to eat the fish, right? If we had the capability of doing so. He also said, if we make a house sentient, it then now has human rights. We transfer our human rights over to the house, right? This is insanity. I don't even need to say it's insanity because I just let it ring and I let the people listen. As for his little trap with made in the image of God, again, the prediction that I had, which all vegans go to, they bring up, in their view, a logical hypothetical in which you have to deny your worldview so that you accept a new world that you actually don't believe can exist, right? That requires you to be completely inconsistent already by abandoning your view, but then trying to give you a gotcha, as if there's a human being in my worldview that has a yarmulke on and looks like me and speaks like me and shares the energies that human beings all share, that I wouldn't be able, that somehow I would know what that person was, right? I mean, a better example, an in-world example would probably be better off for vegan gays in the future is to use like a really convincing robot or something, right? Where you approach the robot and it was near indistinguishable from human beings. Then how would we test if they were made in the image of God? Now, the problem with his claim of made in the image of God is there would be a test. I would be able to actually interact with these new creatures you call the Jays. And I would determine over time, over knowledge, over knowing them personally, right, of whether or not they're made in the image of God. Now, that process is still irrelevant. The whole hypothetical is irrelevant to whether we extend rights, which have still been totally undistinguished up to now, to animals, right? So we're going to extend human rights to animal rights, but we're also going to intervene with the bear's right to eat, right? The bear's right to eat and feed its family in the natural world. So my worldview is consistent with the natural world, the world we see. Vegan Gains view, I don't even fully know what it is, by the way, because he can't distinguish what a mind is. He can't distinguish where he gets his moral oughts from. He can't distinguish where rights are from. He can't distinguish what a better world is. And he can't tell me whether or not I ought to give some object sentience, right? Because that was the other unanswered part. Should I give an object sentience? If my phone starts to feel and understand the same way in his view that a human does, now Now I can't even break this phone. I can't even throw the phone anymore. I'm done.
Thanks for your closing. Go ahead, BG.
Right. So, over the course of the debate, we did end up agreeing on some basic terms such as rights, and we discovered the salient point, the distinction between humans and non-human animals, where he believes it's okay to kill animals, but not human beings, because human beings are made in the image of God. And when I proposed a hypothetical of some humans not being made in the image of God, he just plain refused to answer because he knew exactly what that led to. This entire time, he's been trying to make it seem as though my worldview is ridiculous, insane, absurd. Well, where does his worldview lead to? On nothing but mere assumptions, he would be able to justify wiping out entire races of human beings. He admitted in this debate that he is only making an assumption that God exists. He is only making an assumption that God was made that we were made in God's image. And based on those assumptions, he could wipe out entire races of human beings. He has a genocidal ideology just so that he can justify eating hamburgers. On a whim, he could have the belief that Jews aren't made in God's image. Black people aren't made in God's image. And again, we through the course of the debate, he admitted that these are all just assumptions, and anybody could have this assumption. And I'm pretty sure Hitler